Ok, bom dia a todos. Queria, antes de mais nada, agradecer a participação de todos, em person aqui presencialmente, e também quem está acompanhando a gente remotamente pelo canal do YouTube. A gente vai estar dando início agora à Escola de Estudos Avançados em Desafios Globais em Saúde Animal e Humana. E essas primeiras apresentações, os primeiros avisos, a gente vai falar tanto em português como em inglês, então, para a gente começar a se adaptar e modular o ouvido para inglês. So, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you all here. I would like to start all the activities related to the School of Advanced Studies that we'll have this week. And to start, I would like to invite Professor Raul and Professor Vladimir to join me in the table to explain a little bit about the school and what we are going to do this week, okay? Let's go. Okay, this first is just to present a little bit about the school, about the activities that we are going to develop this week. So I would like to invite Professor Raul to say a few words about the graduate school that we have in UFV and how we organized this activity during this week. Thank you, Professor Raul.
Good morning, all. I will be mixing Portuguese with English here, so and I might get mixed in what it's Portuguese and what it's English, so don't fret. But first I will start with English just to welcome you guys. It's a long way. Viçosa is not particularly easy to arrive or to reach, and I do hope that you enjoy the stay and make the most of it. It's very rare to have 5 graduate programs working together in this sort of initiative. So it's something quite nice to see. And of course, we have high hopes regarding that. And with that, I will shift to Portuguese and eventually complete on English once again. Pessoal, bom dia a todos. Bem-vindo à participação desse evento. É raro a oportunidade de ter tanta gente de lugares tão diversificados presente aqui em Viçosa, até porque Viçosa não é particularmente fácil de chegar nem no Brasil. Fora, pior ainda. Mas, de forma geral, passado esse esforço, normalmente a estadia é agradável, a expectativa é que também assim seja dessa vez e que vocês usufruem ao máximo da iniciativa, né? 5 programas de pós-graduação, dando sustentação a esse esforço, com a possibilidade, inclusive, da participação remota, o que reforça ainda mais a boa vontade de tentar fazer o melhor possível frente a essa oportunidade. Então, de novo, fica aí as boas-vindas a todos. Isso é parte do esforço que vem sendo feito pela universidade, não só de integração, mas de usufruir e beneficiar ao máximo essa rede de interações que vem sendo construída aí ao longo dos últimos anos. E os programas envolvidos nesse evento são uns dos programas que têm se mostrado mais ativo nesse tipo de esforço e tem tido mais a oferecer, inclusive, nesse aspecto. Tá? Então, novamente, bem-vindo a todos, máximo proveito, desejo uma estadia aí agradável a quem veio de fora, e os que estão aqui que usufruam exatamente da presença do pessoal de fora de Viçosa nessa oportunidade. Shifting back to English now, I will pass the word to my colleague, Vladimir, from the International Office, and I'll say also a few words. But during your stay, please don't hesitate to let us know of anything that we might be able to help, even at the graduate school or the International Office. And we should be able to get together, probably tomorrow or Wednesday. I'm not sure. I have to get better acquainted with the program, though. Thank you all.
Thank you all, and welcome everyone. I would like to congratulate the organizers of this event and also the participants, especially the ones that came from abroad. As I said, it's not so easy to come to Viçosa, so we hope that we can give you a very nice experience here And just a few words. Well, I think Professor Nero is going to tell us what's the number of participants. That is very high. It's a very high interest here from not only from our academic staff, but also especially from our students here. It's very nice to see this. Some years ago, when we started the CAPES, our funding agency, launched the program for internationalization of the graduate programs here. They showed studies that it was clear that the results for research, when international cooperation was involved, were in average much higher. So it's very nice to see that that you're here doing this cooperation, and also especially for the students here. The students, that's master's students, PhD students, they can see that engaging in research with international cooperation is very important. So, vou falar isso também em português, especialmente para estudantes, para enfatizar isso. Os estudantes que estão participando aqui, eu ouvi falar como a importância de vocês se envolverem nessa pesquisa que tem cooperação internacional, porque vocês vão ter possibilidade de ter resultados em média que são muito superiores, ser aprovados já em estudos durante muitos anos. Vocês têm oportunidades disso, fazer junto dessas pesquisas e especialmente também ter experiência internacional, talvez como um doutorado de sanduíche, um duplo grau. Outra coisa, another thing that's very interesting that's happening here in Brazil, recent studies show that the number of students that are interested in the graduate programs here in Brazil is decreasing. That happened, of course, during the pandemics, but not only the pandemics. Recently, after the pandemics, it's still decreasing in some areas. It's the phenomenon that I suppose it happened in the well-developed countries, but it's also happening here in Brazil. So I think the only way that we can just success in this environment is that we can attract more international students, just like the programs in the well-developed countries have done. So also in events like that, with international cooperation, with all of these, also changing our teaching to English too. We are going to try to attract more international students, and so we can have can keep with these good results that we have until now for research. I think so. It's okay. Okay.
Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you, Raul. Só alguns avisos em português antes da gente iniciar as atividades. Depois eu mudo rapidinho para inglês, que é mais relacionado às palestras, às aulas que a gente vai ter. Em nome da organização dessa escola de estudos avançados, eu queria, como o Raul mencionou, são 5 programas de pós-graduação diretamente envolvidos na organização dessa atividade: a medicina veterinária, a zootecnia, ciência e tecnologia de alimentos, microbiologia agrícola e nutrição. Então, esses 5 programas juntaram esforços para a gente desenvolver essa atividade e conseguir convidar esse grupo de professores de instituições parceiras para estar, ao longo dessa semana, desenvolvendo essas atividades. As aulas serão principalmente nos períodos da manhã, com exceção da quarta-feira, que a gente vai ter atividade de manhã e à tarde. E de todos a programação prevista, infelizmente, só uma aula que não vai ser possível ser realizada, porque o professor Hilário Ferrotino, da University of Turin, ele teve um problema de saúde e ele teve que cancelar a participação dele nessa atividade. Mas, de 15 convidados, tá bom, né? Isso acontece. Mas a visita dele vai ser adiada para alguma outra atividade que a gente vai desenvolver e a gente vai oferecer a toda a comunidade acadêmica. A gente teve mais de 300 inscritos no evento. A gente restringiu a um máximo de 100 para atividades presenciais, que eu acredito que é o que está mais ou menos aqui. Então, eu queria agradecer e pedir para que vocês se mantenham firmes até o final da semana, até sexta-feira, nas aulas. Vai ser tudo comunicado em inglês. A gente entende que talvez seja um pouco um desafio, mas faz parte do treinamento de vocês. Eu tenho certeza que todos vão aproveitar muito bem. Estamos validando isso como créditos também para os alunos da pós-graduação. Então, por isso que vai haver um controle de frequência e também uma avaliação após ao final das atividades. Não é uma prova formal, mas a gente está pensando em, com os professores, nós estamos discutindo algum formato para fazer uma avaliação simples, pelo menos para a gente ter um feedback de quem assistiu às aulas e ter também um resultado também para validar como crédito. Para os alunos da UFV, isso vai ser mais simples, a gente fazer esse aproveitamento de créditos. Para quem é de fora da UFV e está acompanhando online, vocês também poderão aproveitar como créditos, só que tem um processo interno que a gente vai ter que desenvolver aqui, que é minimamente burocrático, mas sem uma burocracia. Acredito que a PPG vai ajudar a gente a desenrolar isso facilmente, como de costume. Ok? As atividades vão estar sendo transmitidas no YouTube e elas vão ficar disponíveis aí por um tempo no canal da pós-graduação em Medicina Veterinária, que foi o canal que a gente acabou criando para transmissão e para manutenção dessas aulas. Então, vai ficar à disposição aí para todo mundo assistir quando for conveniente também. E quem quiser acompanhar as aulas posteriormente, também, não necessariamente durante a semana. Ok? So, I just explained a little bit about the possibility for the students to have credits for this activity, and I just explained how to do that for them, so it's not a problem. For the visiting professors, I just said that we organizing 5 graduate programs to organize this activity, so that's why, as Raul said, it was a very interesting effort that's not so usual to see in the universities, but what is valuable. And we hope that the students make the best of this effort for their training. So we are very excited with your participation here. Again, we'd like to thank you for the long travel to arrive until here. We would also like to thank CAPS for the support through the program CAPS Sprint. It's an internationalization program that we have in the university that supports such activities. And also some specific grants that we're able to use for that from the graduate programs that we mentioned, and also from SAMBA, that is an international laboratory that our group has, and we were able to support the visit of some professors in his also based on that. Okay, so Raul, Vladimir, I'd like to thank you again, and then I would like to invite Claudio to start the academic activities. Feel free, so that's fine. Okay. You're talking here or using the mic?
No, I'm using the mic.
Okay. Would be a bit better. I will put your presentation there.
Thank you. Thank you. So, hello everybody, I'm the first. It's good and bad of being the first. I will try to keep a very complicated topic very simple. So I will give some information trying to be as light as possible. But first, thanks to the organizer for having me here. Let me show you where I come from. I'm Claudio Forte, I'm Italian. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Veterinary Science in Turin, which is on the north-west part of Italy. Quite a long trip for being here, I can confirm. And today I'm going to tell you a story about welfare, about animal welfare, and how the different characters of this story cooperate for a common goal. And as always, I'm a professor, so allow me to start with a normal lesson with some definition. But these definitions are quite interesting because come from different sources, and it will help you to understand the topic and the animal welfare. So the most official one, as first, is the World Animal Health Organization, la Organización Internacional des Epizooties, that define animal welfare, not defining animal welfare. So it always says that animal has a good welfare when it's healthy, comfortable, well-nourished, safe, able to express innate behavior, and is not suffering from unpleasant state, such pain and distress. So it's quite a complicated definition. Define it a little bit what is good and what is bad for animal welfare. But then I really like what Apple bioscientists said in 2018, and this is really important for you to understand that welfare is not a pathology, it's not an illness, it's not a bacteria or a virus, it's not an all or nothing, but it's a state of an animal on a continuum for poor to good. So we should be, as scientists, no matter which field you belong to measure animal welfare in this way, not calculating just a yes or a no, or not, but moving in this continuum. This makes the things a little bit more complicated, that a diagnostic something. But then we got some other definition, because all the characters involved in this science are very numerous. So the World Organization for Animal Health state that welfare is a complex and multifaceted subject with scientific, ethical, economic, cultural, social, religious, and political dimension. And this is true, because all these components belong to animal welfare. And we will see how this will coordinate the story. To make you understand the political dimension of animal welfare, the European community postponed the welfare legislation review after the election day, because they were afraid that doing it now can be quite difficult for the political scenario. And then the World Animal Protection say the animal welfare refers to the quality of life experienced by an animal and encompass how well the animal is coping with his or her current situation and surrounds. So here you got 4 different views, one official, one from a scientist, 2 for, let's say, animal protection organization. From my point of view, we are the link between these views. We are scientists. No matter which of the 5 graduation programs you belong to, you are scientists. We must be always science-driven, but we must be able to communicate our science to the public, to the people who move on the other way, on the tube, for example. But coming back to the story, all the good stories starts with the same sentence. So once upon a time, there was a lady. This lady was called Ruth Harrison, not a scientist, but an actress, an activist. She spent the year of the Second World War just on an ambulance all over Europe giving help to the soldiers. She's from the UK. And one day, late in the 60s, she received this leaflet under the door. Very easy, so something that happened quite every day. This leaflet was about the crusade against all cruelty to animals. So she received this leaflet and she thought, okay, I agree with that. I'm already a vegetarian, but this is not really important for the story. And I will just give this leaflet to my friends and colleagues and family, and that's it. But then something changed in her feelings. And in '64, so 4 years after receiving this leaflet, she wrote this book. And everything changed thanks to a book. Because from this book, the Bramble Committee was called from the UK government, and the Bramble report brought to the Farm Animal Welfare Council that state up the 5 freedom, which probably you know. And these are the 5 pillars of the actual animal welfare legislation and animal science, basically. So everything started from a non-scientist, from a very, let's say, simple book, from not simple, but you got what I mean? Everything started from here, and this is still ongoing, because welfare science is not only about science, but it's the consumer who push constantly the science to improve and the legislation to be updated. It's important to understand this view, because everyone is a main character. There are no secondary characters. We are part of the story, not the main ones. We are only the ones who link the public, with the consumers, with the activism, with the politician, and all the rest. This 5 freedom refers to what an animal should not feel during staying in a farm. But this is not enough. We cannot say as humans that we are in a good welfare if we are free from something. I want to live my life in a good way. I want to have positive experience. I want to spend time with friends, family, or eating good food. Free from hunger is not enough. I don't want to be free from hunger. I want to experience good food. And so some time ago, keep in mind that this was done in '79, in 2015, the 5 domain came up and joined the 5 freedom with the positive experience from the animal. I know this table is very complicated, but we move forward trying to declinate the 5 freedom in a new concept that keep in mind the bad and the good of the 5 freedom. I try to simplify it a little bit. So what Mello and Bosler says that animal welfare derives from physical functional domains and affective experience domains. These physical and functional are divided in survival-related factors. So we find nutrition, environment, and health, and you are going to listen a lot about this domain during this week. And the other one is about behavior. Then you got the affective domain, which reflects the mental state of the animal, which is affected by the previous 2. So everything is interrelated, and it's important to understand this above all, and then move in the specific way to evaluate animal welfare. So basically, the 5 freedom became the 5 domain. So we have to care about nutrition, physical environment, health, behavioral interaction, and mental state of an animal, of a group of animals, to evaluate their welfare. And this is the new way of trying to apply what we know about welfare in the practical. So not staying just in science, but put this in something that can help the farmers and the consumer to better understand animal welfare. This is really important. Welfare must be considered from our point of view a science. Thus, it must be measurable. We cannot express opinion about animal welfare. We must build up a standardized method to evaluate the welfare of the animal. Talking about livestock, because for pet is another word. So the important is to build up a method, and the easy way is to start with a checklist, knowing what should be present in the farm or not present. And all these different features has to be included in only one document. And it's not easy at all, because in one document you should be able to represent the different shades of the livestock scenario. coming here from Zoademata Airport, we passed through a very nice region with a lot of hills and a lot of farm fazendas. And I saw very different conditions just 1 kilometer from the other. And you should be able to build up one method representing all of them. So this is a very challenging. What I'm going to present you today is what we already have in Italy, which is not perfect at all, but at least it's something. So I got to be honest, because scientists should be always honest. But it's something that we are trying to implement. So this is the name of the system you have, with a very nice Renew logo. And is a system approved by both the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Agriculture, because in Italy, veterinarian systems are under the Ministry of Health, not under the agriculture. And this is a very good research for us. And down here, you see all the different people can be present in the classiform system. So we are going to have the administrator, the ministry, the politician, which is important. They can access the system to download the report from the territory and explore the statistics. The veterinarian, the istituti zooprofilattici, there is no translation for this, is an Italian system for supporting the livestock and the animal in public health. Operator, the veterinarian from the farm, the worker from the farm, the owner of the farm, they all can access the same system. And this is a really good research. So you got the private practice, the national health, the auditor from the third parties, because when I sell a product, where the buyer can ask for audit and come in the farm to see is everything okay or not. So they use the same system. Then you got all the farm and also the slaughterhouse, all to the same system. They all charge the data on an app, available, of course, for iOS, for Android, for Microsoft, and for whatever. In the same system, also the electronic drug prescription is present, and the national data bank, which records all the animals present in the territory. So all they belong to one system. This is really good, because it's the first time that all these systems talk together. So this is the very complicated draft of the checklist structure. We are going to get through this, but basically you get a lot of items. Keep in mind that each item corresponds to one question, characterized by 3 different answers: a negative one, a sufficient one, and a good one. So all the structure, all the checklists follow the same line. And more than 100 items has to be considered. We tried to keep it as simple as possible, but less than this is quite impossible. So by now, but hopefully it will be simplified a little bit, it takes more than 2 to 5 hours for the first time you are in a farm to make the checklist. But once you did it, you will have the full view of the structure and the farm you are in, considering all. So you got 3 areas and 2 other, let's say, areas which are big risks and biosecurity, which belong to an external system. But the welfare is defined by management, structure, and animal-based measures. So it takes into account both animal-based and non-animal-based. I don't know if you know the difference, but the animal-based measure is basically what the animal can tell us about its own welfare. So like BCS score or presence of lesions or let's say the mutilation can be an animal-based measure, or even the mortality can be an animal-based measure, even if it comes from registries. So you got 3 scores, 3 areas, so farm management, housing and keeping, and animal-based measures that cooperates to build up the total welfare score, but not at the same grades. So as you can see, the total welfare score is composed by 50% of the sum of the 2 areas, farm management and housing, and the other 50% is the C area, so the animal base. So what the animal tell us is more important than considering the structure, the stuff, and the housing and equipment. And all this is translated in dashboard to be explorable by the farmer. So the farmer knows very well in a very easy way, am I on the green, on the yellow, on the red? So am I good, am I or am I bad? It's very easy to be understood by the farmer, and they are classified as it is. So insufficient, adequate, and optimal. The total welfare score is a little bit more complicated because we need 5 classes, so it's just divided in five different scores. And this is what the farmers see. So it can be quite complicated at first sight because there are a lot of data, but each of these points is a farmer. So this is the Lombardy region, for example. Here you got the dashboard, and I don't know if you see it properly, maybe online it will be better. Here, there is a black line, not the one of the pin, but a black line fixed, which says to the farmer, you are here, so this is you, but the median of your territory is over here. And this is important because farmers, most of the time, are competitive. So they want to be the best, always. And they want to... I never met in my world a farmer that did not care about his quality and the neighbor quality, and the neighbor of the neighbor quality, and the friend quality. So this keeps the farmer informed. So you are doing good or bad, but not only for yourself, but see that your neighbor is better than you. So you got to do something to improve. And this is really interesting because they, above all the checklists, when we present the farmer the data, they only care about this. So is it true that I'm worse than my neighbor? Yes. What do we have to do to improve? And then the farmer is available to put in place all the measures needed to improve. And to make you understand how complicated can be to build up a protocol like this, let me introduce you the shadow of cow-calf line. Does everybody knows what cow-calf line is? Are you confident with this kind of terms? So the cow-calf line is that particular livestock chain devoted to the production of the calf. Okay, so where the female are together or without the bull and produce the calf, so get the calf at least once per year, hopefully. Quite common here in Brazil, as in Italy, as in France, as in all other parts of the world. This is basically where the beef come from. So from somewhere they have to be born, so they are born over here. And you got to understand that we tried to develop a protocol able to include all these kind of farms. So in Italy we have a semi-extensive system which can be open or closed. Open is the cow-calf line that sell the calf and once that is weaned, so around 4 or 6 months, the calf is sold to get fattened in another farm. The closed one is the one in which the calf are fattened in the farm, so everything stay in the same place. And this semi-extensive system is the system in which most of the time the animals are indoor for winter time and moved outdoor only for spring, summer, and autumn. So they spend like 2 or 3 months indoor and then they are moved outside. And the average present is 50 to 100 animals. This is the number in Italy, quite different from the one in the US, different from the one you have in Brazil, but not so much because I read some statistics that most of the farm, not most, but 36, 37% of the farm are familiar here in Brazil. So it's something that can be useful here too. Same intensive, they spend time more than 2 to 3 months indoor and then they are moved outdoor, but only close to the farm. Open or closed, you already know what it is. Reproduction and fattening, if it's closed, more than 100 animals. But then we have the confined free barn, so they are free, but just in a very confined environment. And they have open or closed cycle farm, more than 100. But again, we have the total extensive one, less than 50 animals, and the semi-extensive tied stall. You know what tied means? The tied stall is the animal are blocked in chain. So in a post, they stay there, but then they are moved outdoor for the rest of the year. So they spend the winter time over there, and then they are moved outside. This is not mistreating of animal. This is allowed by law. And even being in a tie stall can have some advantages. You have no hierarchical problem. You can apply the precision feeding because you know perfectly what an animal eats. So keep the mind open about this. I personally don't like it, but I recognize that there is something good also in this kind of farm. So imagine to build up a single protocol able to represent all these different scenarios. And there are more than this. It's not really an easy way. And to complicate, moreover, the things, I give you an example. This is an animal-based measure called flight from human test, which basically answered the question how the animal are treated. So is the animal confident with the human? Is the animal calm when the human go to the animal and approach the animal? And is a very standardized method which has been set up in Erwin, actually, which was led by a Brazilian scientist now in São Paulo. And is a very standardized method that sees that you have to open your arms, stay on 45 degrees, and get close to the animal very calmly. As much as the animal gets confident, as much you can touch the animal. If this happens, so the animal just step back, the value is insufficient. If the animal just is curious, but then step back, the value is sufficient. If you can cuddle the animal, the test is positive. Okay, so this is the baseline of the flight from human test. And is important that obviously this test must be performed by an external person, because you cannot ask the farmer, oh, how do you treat the animal? And the farmer say, well, so let me show, and he goes only for the most confident one. So even if sometimes they get scared about the plastic we wear, I can tell you that this works. But this is in a confined environment. Trying to imagine what it is to do this in open air. So you get close to the animal, but the animal is not really that happy. Okay, so imagine apply this standardized method in nature. And this last video is just to tell that the science is safe, so nobody gets hurt from this video. And this is what we have to deal with. So there are many standardized items and many standardized things we can apply in livestock science already. But you have to deal with reality, always. And when they ask me to go and see the normal behavior, are there hierarchical problems of the animal? Or do the animals fight each other? Or how do they behave when they are in nature? And then you go outdoor, you go in a farm, and what you see is just this. These are chianina, a very big cows. They just come and stay and look at you badly. And how we are supposed to evaluate the normal behavior over there. Okay, this is the reality of the things we are dealing with. And maybe we can try to guess who's the leader of the herd. Maybe we can try to guess, but it's guessing. And guessing is not science. So we have to find out a method that is able to do this in a standardized way. For sure, no. Okay. This farm is not so bad, because even finding 2 different feeders is something that opened my mind to a very precise chapter that says, oh, maybe the farmer is aware that some hierarchical problem can happen. So a very not gentle cow can go to the other and avoid them to eat, so he put 2 different feeders. But this is something you see with the experience, not with the standardized method. But the main research of this kind of system is to have a standardized data collection all over the national territory, which for the scientific point of view should not be underestimated because everybody follow the same line. And this is why the system has been applied to a lot of different publications. This is the one you got in the program. And they applied the classifying system to understand the amount of drug used in the fattening period of the farm. So they standardized everything for the DDD, which is the daily drug use for the animal at risk, but they used a standard weight. And this was one of the major pitfalls of this kind of work, because only in Italy we have more than 20 local breeds with very different weights, and we import a lot of Charolais, Limousin, Blonde Aquitaine, or crossbreed from France. So using this kind of system is very good because it's trying to standardize a little bit the drug use and all the rest, but doesn't take in mind what the standard weight is, because the canina can weigh up to 1 ton, while the Limousin is slaughtered quite younger than the canina one. So we have to keep in mind when you read a paper like this, or when you read always a scientific paper, try to spot which are the limitations, because this is where we can work to improve something that already has been done. These are other papers in which the classifying system is applied in Tuscany or in mountain area in a small-scale farm to show you that the system can be tailored in the needs that the system has. And this is a work we have done with the classifying system in cow, calf, beef farms about the antibiotic consumption. So this is important to be evaluated, because having one system in which all the data are collected together with welfare, animal welfare, the drug use, the animal presence, and all the registries is really important, because it gives science the way to improve and have a standardized method to collect everything from the north to the south of Italy, which is spread in vertical in the world. We use the same method. And this is also now applied in a very brand new European project just started in 2024. Imagine 360 million in 7 years. So this is the magnitude of this project in which we are involved. And there are several actions over there, and basically this will be the future of the research and the welfare in European and in all the states that commercialize with the European country, because all the states that give us some product has to follow the same rules. And we have now working on this, in which the classifying system is present. Is a very big. We are more than 90 partners and 1,000 now. It's too much. 100 researchers all over Europe. So I will keep you posted about this, because this is where welfare, health, all the veterinary sciences, the animal science, the nutrition will come. And it's just launched, so if you're interested, the website will be available in like 1 or 2 weeks. And there is where all the European research about animal science will be collected together. So basically, as I say, once that we meet, you will have no door to open, but the door will be always open for me. So don't be afraid to send me an email whenever you want to. I will be more than available to ask any kind of question and any kind of difficulties. If you are interested, I tried to be brief, But if you want, we can go in deep to explore the system and to see some of the checklist. Of course, they are all in Italian because they have to be used by the farmer and veterinarian in the field. But even the language is never a barrier. Most, if we talk about Latin language, I know you are Portuguese, you speak Portuguese, as I speak Italian, but I can understand very well both the language. So this is what basically we do, and even the scenario are not so different from our landscape to yours. So this can be a good opportunity to explore some joint section and to try to develop this particular system, because the cow-calf line, so the line that produces the calf, is the less studied. We know very well what happened in dairy lines. We know very well what happened in beef when they are fattened. But we still have a lot to know in the cow-calf line, and this will be really an opportunity to cooperate, because in Brazil you are master of this, and you got to be aware, because I saw a lot of cow-calf farm system coming here, and your knowledge, your skills, your knowledge of the field can be applied to improve even the other. So being honest, as I told you at the beginning, this is not perfect, but can be. Okay, we are working on this, we are still studying. I'm not presenting you something done, so some pillar, but is under construction. We can build up this palace together, so keep this in mind. I'll be here for the whole week and the week after, not only for institutional meeting with teachers and professors, but also for students if needed. And there are a lot of opportunities to move abroad and to come. I hopefully will send many students over here, and PhD, and not only the researcher, to focus on this, because this is one of the major cooperation opportunity I see for the development of the, let's say, European, but let me be nationalist, Italian-Brazil axis. So I'm done. If you want to make some question by now or later on, it will not be a problem for me. We have a question from the audience. Can we use this?
Okay, some questions? Oh, Valentina.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So you explained about the Italian system, and then you concluded your presentation with the European project. Is the goal of this project to try to unify and have some common guideline within the European community?
Yeah, basically that project is a giant one and divided in different actions. So one of the action is the standardization of all the existing protocol in Europe. So many researchers will cooperate together trying to build up, which is a very complicated task, one protocol for whole. So it's like the Lord of the Rings maybe, but it's something that they are trying to do. And the difficulty is to understand how to build up one protocol that can be applied to all the different shades of livestock in all the different species, because what I presented over here was my field, so the cow-calf line, but the project will apply to all the livestock species, fisheries and terrestrial, so marine and terrestrial and all the rest. So it will be a very big, let's say, challenge, but the system I presented will be part of this, and can be an opportunity to cooperate and build up something new, as it happened in AWIN and welfare quality and all the European projects already did on animal welfare.
Okay, thank you.
Some questions? Okay, Jamel.
Thank you, Claudio, for this nice presentation. I had exactly the same question, but now we have to find another one, because we had some project on this topic, and the question that I'm gonna to ask you will be on the welfare, because you told us a lot of things how to design and to define hence the welfare for animals. So in this case, you mentioned animals fed indoors, outdoors, etc., but I didn't hear nothing on their microbiota and something that could be connected to their welfare. That's the main question. And another one, which is really very small question. You mentioned in the second slide, so far I remember, you mentioned like religious aspect for the.
Yeah.
I know that in India, for example, there are points that need to be. If you can tell us a little bit on this point. Thank you.
You mean in the definition about welfare?
Yeah.
This one.
Yes. Thank you.
So for the protocol, this is an on-farm assessment. So it cannot take care about the laboratory ones. So it's devoted to the on-farm and to the people that go in the farm and can assess the protocol. But the protocol is built up on the knowledge we have of the consequences of bad welfare. So all the bibliography, all the references, all the, let's say, previous studies about microbiota, about contamination, about, let's say, salmonella or other bacteria in the farm are applied over there, most in the biosafety part than in the other. But the protocol I presented is done for the people to go in the farm and should be completed over there. Then all the other analysis can be satellite to this, so you can choose to do something more. But all the checklists must be completed when you are in the farm. And that's why even the other parameters of welfare, like cortisol, for example, or other instrumental welfare evaluation are not present over here, because the main goal and the main challenge was to build up a method which start and end in the farm, to give the farmer an immediate feedback about their compliance of welfare. And talking about the definition of the World Organization for Animal Health, I kind of agree in that, because welfare is not about science. It's not only about science, at least, but there are many shades, many interests that we should take into account. And for sure, one of these is the religious. As scientists, we know all the difficulties of dealing, for example, with the ritual slaughtering, okay? And they are dealing with this. Some countries are not so happy to dealing with that. The most famous was Belgium, who banned totally the ritual slaughtering. Some other are applying the different legislative path to adequate a little bit the ritual slaughtering over there. In my opinion, we should find a compromise between the two. So they are working for this, even with representative for different religion, because it's not only Islam, of course, it's Jewish, it's even Hindu that they cannot handle the cows, for example. So it's something that we have to deal with, because we represent, as scientists, the whole world. We cannot focus only on one part and say, okay, I'm going to ban the religious, the ritual slaughtering because it's just not respecting the animal welfare. But we should work to improve it, and we are working with rabbis, for example, and all the people working in religious to find a compromise between the two. This is also what all the different projects are devoted to, because it's something that will exist, no matter what science says. It's something that will move on and will exist exactly in the same way. So we have to find the way to, in a respectful way, not just banning. This is my personal opinion. We will see what they will do in the project, but personally, I can tell you this.
Thank you. You helped me to raise my knowledge on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ok, any more comment, question? Se o pessoal quiser falar em português, a gente pode traduzir também, tá?
You can try to ask me something in Portuguese.
You understand, I'm sure you will.
But I will answer in Italian.
Ok, Marcos.
Claudio, thank you for your presentation. I was interested about your flight tests. And I wonder, you mostly study in cow-calf situations. Do you, or have you tried that with, like cows with their offsprings, or with dairy cows or dairy cattle, would that test be different? Would you use the same assumptions, or would we have to do some sort of adaptations in different situations?
Well, the test is basically the same, but the results are much more different. If you apply the same test with the dairy cattle, they are much more confident. They are managed at least once per day or two per day, twice per day. So they most of the time do not even make a step back. They just come there with the nose and try to lick your hands, as we are close friends. Personally, I've never tried in a cow-calf fly with offspring, and I will never try it because it can be quite dangerous. This kind of cattle, like Chianina, Marchigiana, all the Italian breeds are well known to be more, let's say, protective with the offspring. And this is also something we have to deal with, because in the protocol I presented is well stated that each ABMS must be observed in a certain population. So you got to make the observation on a percentage of the total herd, and trying to include the different categories. So heifers, young animals, old animals, pregnant animals, and animals with the offspring. But can be quite dangerous doing that kind of test over there. Or at least you will have a fly zone of 5 to 6 meters, and it will always be negative. So that's the difficulty of building a single protocol. And this is also why all the protocols are present for all the species. The last one published was about the cow-calf fly, because it's the most difficult to be applied when you are in farm. So basically, the fly for human test is a very useful test, very standardized, because as told was created from the animal EWIN, so the Animal Welfare Indicator Project from the European Community, like 7 years ago, something like this. But it's something that should be tailored when you are in the field or in the top of the mountain, in the snow or under the storm. So you have something that you have to deal with.
Okay. Any more questions? Any comment? There's someone in online. Any question online? We will start to. We are about to start a project on dairy in which we will focus on the microbiome and also on the antimicrobial resistance, and we will compare some different farms with different producing profiles. So maybe this could be an opportunity to include that, to check if there's some interference on that. So yeah, I think we can talk this week.
This is
about
also
that. It would be interesting, because here in Brazil we have some. You just said that we're very quite similar, and in Italy regarding the characteristics of the production, depending on the region. Here in our region we have a lot of family farms that we used to say, that is family-based farms. Very small farms with low production, but they are relevant in total to contribute, at least in dairy production, if we think about that. But these characteristics can vary in different regions that you have in Brazil. If you go to the center of Brazil or São Paulo state, it's totally different. But here in this region, particularly, I think it's quite similar of what you described.
Yeah, but this is the opportunity of applying this kind of protocol,
yes,
because
that's why I get interested on that.
You just have the data on farm classification, and then you go through this with different analysis about microbiota or something else, or antimicrobial usage, for example. Or we did a very nice study on the gene expression of resistance of the microbes present in the farm, thanks to this kind of classification. So basically, you have a standardized method to know the farm. And that's it. And then you move on.
Then you can try to check if there's some trend based on that.
And if we find out that, for example, farms with bad litter have a bad microbiota, we could try to include a specific item in the checklist onwards. Yes. So it's a feedback given to the field from the lab and vice versa.
Agree.
That's the power of this kind of system, to be open and closed in the farm.
Good point. Okay. Okay, so is there no questions anymore? I think, thank you, Claudio, for your presentation, for your class. We'll have now a short break. I I don't know if the coffee break is already ready for us, but I think we can have a break and start in some minutes, around 10 and 15. Okay? Thank you. No, it's not necessary. Just letting here. I was afraid that they would follow. Yes. Okay, so let's return our activities. So I'd like to invite Luis Tedeschi for his class. He will talk about also welfare. Luis, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Luis. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I'd like to acknowledge the committee, the organizing committee. It's really nice to be back here, University of Viçosa. So I'm going to go and talk a little bit about sustainable cattle production, and I will cover some of what we've been doing in the United States. And I think we're going to overlap some of what Claudio mentioned this morning as well. So the first question is, always asking this, it's can smart farming help sustainable beef cattle? And this is a big topic for us right now in the US and Europe, and I know here in Brazil you're also addressing some of these questions about smart farming, and I'll address that later on in the talk. The two main topics, challenges that I see and we see in the US and around the world are beef cattle sustainability, and I'm talking about beef cattle here, but it goes to animal production, livestock production in general. The second one is meeting this global demand for food and high quality protein, high quality protein. The facts that we know are many advances in management, diet, meat production, precision livestock farming, and farming and computer vision, increased beef production in terms of being more efficient, reduction of the beef cattle herd. We've seen that overall number of animals are actually decreasing, the size of the herd. And we see a lot of problems in terms of reduction of land availability. This is something has always been a problem and will always continue to be a problem. So this is a plot showing you the world population. You've probably seen different versions of this plot or this graph, this data around the world. But something that strikes me on this particular plot here is that this shaded area here shows population in the world, and you have a big number here at the end. I cannot even read from here. But the point being is this other line here. This is the line that actually shows growth rate. So this is the rate of people being added to the world. So you will see that it has actually peaked at some point here. So the growth rate of population, people, it's actually declining. We still see an increase in population because the rate is positive, but it will actually decrease less and less further as we move on. So this is a fact. And yet, there is a lot of people that needs to be fed, and they're looking for this type of food, high quality food. So just give you an idea where is the population around the world. And here, all the countries that are listed as the most populous countries in the world. You have China, India, US, Indonesia, Pakistan, and so forth. So those are the places that we always have to be careful and paying attention of how these people are being fed and what is going on with this population. So this is a picture, this is in India, and about 2 years ago, it was a big news, at least in the US, of how these people actually move from one place to the next. But the point of this picture is really to show where we've been and where we are at right now in terms of population, people around the world. So we know the limits of sustainable beef cattle production, and it goes to livestock production in general, but I'm going to be focused on beef. That is the big population here, and I mentioned this 9 billion to 10 billion in 2050. We do need to manage these finite sources, such as arable land. Need to reduce livestock contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, and I will cover this later on. Demand for animal source foods in low and middle income countries has actually increased by a lot. And the demand is still predicted to increase by 35% from 2012 to 2030 and by 50% by 2050. So the question is how to actually feed these people, the food that they're looking for and the food that sometimes they actually need. I'm not even going to be talking about hunger and famine around the world. So in my presentation, I'll cover some of these topics. I'll show a little bit about the beef cattle industry, sustainability and limits of sustainability, smart farming, talk a little bit about modeling and data collection, some possible drawbacks, and I'm going to touch a little bit about education towards the end of my presentation. So you've seen this plot, and this is published several times. This is in the UN. This is a number of cattle around the world. So we have about this in 2012, like 1 billion here to 2020. 1 billion here. So it's kind of a steady state. It's not either going up or down. So this is the herd of cattle in the world, even though sometimes it changes from one place to the next. And this is where we find beef or beef cattle around the world. So you have places like here, the US, 18%, you have Brazil, and those are the major ones. And you have many other places here with all of these different percentages here. But these are the big players in terms of beef cattle population around the world. So you see the big ones, and I'm listing here United States, Brazil, Europe, China. So those are the big players. And if you add India, the 5 big players of where this beef production is, or the population. So this is to show a picture of what is beef cattle production in the US. So this is a typical feedlot, feed yard. This particular feed yard has about 110,000 animals one time that they're being fed. So going back to some of the Claudio's presentation is how can we address this animal welfare and stuff like this. So in situations like this, the typical production of beef cattle in the US is very similar to what is in Brazil, somewhat similar to what is in Europe, somewhat similar what we see in China and Australia and some of these other countries that you have. So you always have this cow-calf operation, the weaning portion. Then you have these stalkers or backgrounders. So those animals are on a pasture before they go to an auction and before they go to a feed yard or feed lot. I just showed you a picture. So during that time, they're finished, and then it goes to a packing plant, and then retail and consumer. So this life cycle of beef cattle production is very similar in several places around the world. There are differences from specific sectors in different countries, but it does not really make them more or less sustainable in the sense. You really have to look at the sustainability within the country where you're producing this. And some of the point here is this: most of the time in the US and here in Brazil and in Australia and some other places, these animals are on a pasture. So the time we start counting when they are cow-calf situation all the way to backgrounder, they are, most of the time, they are on a grazing situation. So it does require land to keep these animals, except for some places in China where they have confined cow-calf. So this is a situation in the US showing the distribution, actually the evolution of a number of animals. This one is from 2001 to 21. So you have a little bit of a decline, and we have like 95 million animals here. So this is all the way to 21. So there is a lot of a drop on this, and then it comes back and picks up. But there is a little bit of a trend of decreasing here. I think it's more stable now. It will probably be stable for some time. This drop here, drought. So every time you have climatic events like this, you're always going to have some sort of a fluctuation here. But in this case, they were able to pick it up. So this was a reflection of the 2011 in essence. So this is the commercial beef production in the US, actually showing the same number. This is the commercial production of beef in the US. And like I said, there is a little bit of a decline here in the number of animals in the US. But if you look at this graph here, this is US again, total red meat consumption. This is monthly average, and this is all the way to 2022. There is a very steady incline, not a decline, an incline, an increase in a steady consumption of red meat in the US. Remember, this is red meat. And despite the decline in the number of the herd size, there is an incline in red meat consumption in the US. And what I say here, the commercial total red meat by month, it is an increase since the 1990s, mid-1990s. And this is, we believe on this data because this is the federally inspected total red meat that is sold or inspected in the US. This is, of course, you need to look into importation at that time too. So this is just an overall herd, cattle herd in the US. You have, this is total cattle herd in the US. Started really low here, then it peaked in 1975, and then it went down a little bit, and that's what I said, it has some sort of a steady state here or a stable situation. And yet, we're still being able to increase the production in the US and still increasing the meat, the red meat supply for this. And things that has happened is like this, since the 1970s and the mid-1970s, I should say, we have about 30% less animals than we had. This is number of animals. Using about 20% less feed to feed these animals, in part because we have less animals, but in part because we increase the efficiency and nutrition of these animals. And something that we need to bring to our equation is water consumption. We actually the system been using 12% less water. and this goes back to 2013, and this is to produce the same amount of red meat. So to produce the same amount of red meat that was produced back in the 1970s compared to the 2013, this is the statistics for that. Similar data goes for dairy. So if you compare for the 1940s all the way to the 2007, 80% less animals to produce the same amount of milk, 70%, almost 80% less feed, and about 65% less water. Extremely efficient to produce the same amount of milk and the same amount of red meat. So when we say, can it be sustainable, is it efficient? I would say it's been increasing the efficiency and it's been increasing sustainability in a sense. So then the question is, can we be more efficient? So saying that we're not efficient in that sense, it's not an accurate assessment, but the real assessment now is, can it be more efficient given the situation? So that brings us to the topic of what sustainability is. And like animal welfare definitions, there are many, many definitions in sustainability. But in general, the definition of sustainability is to produce the same amount of a product that you want to produce today without impacting the capacity of future generations to produce that same product using the same resources, some of the same resources. So it is, in essence, is being able to keep the same status quo without decreasing the ability of future generations to produce their own food or the food that they will need in the future. There are some challenges here about what is this sustainability is in terms of general information, what are the environmental factors, and what is being done in terms for, at least for beef cattle production. So this, we talk a lot about this, the 3 pillars of sustainability, or definition of sustainability involves the economic aspect. So for something to be sustainable, it needs to include economic profitability aspects of the activity. Then there is this environment aspect, which it has to be, I'm going to say, climate responsible or environment responsible to maintain the environment the way it is and not making it worse. That is this social aspect, which means being able to keep the same workforce, workload, or maintaining the social stability. We're talking about humans here. To these 3 pillars, it's very easy to add 2 more components that I think we need to start talking about those. The first one is education. I think we need to increase education about what is sustainability, what is a sustainable, responsible thing. And we also need to include, unfortunately, politics. I think it has to have some politics involved here, because if we don't have that type of information, nothing like this is going to move on. So unfortunately, we need to start talking about that. But going back to the 3 pillars, the 3 fundamental pillars of sustainability, I like to compare all of these, the environment, social, and the economic, as a 3-leg stool. So to be in a perfect, stable condition, situation, a stool has to have all of these 3 legs, has to have the exactly same size. So in terms of size means they have to be equivalent in terms of what they do to maintain this stability. But there is something else that needs to exist to keep this stool balanced, which is this cross supports here, or these cross bars, that they need to support these three legs of this stool, otherwise it's not stable. So you have to think about this three-leg stool as what is the sustainability issue is, and when we're talking about in terms of future. So from environment to economic has to be viable, economic and social has to be equitable to everybody, and from social to environment has to be acceptable. What we're trying to do, we're trying to change, has to be acceptable, can be done, and it's viable at the same time. So how does the cattle production impact the environment? And this being something that we talk all the time, and it's not something new. For a long, long time, animal production, livestock production has actually known about all these issues, and we talk about this all the time. It's just a matter when it makes to the press and makes a different spin to the information. The primary sources of greenhouse gas in livestock is mainly in the ruminant area would be methane, and that is also the non-enteric methane. And those would include the N2O, the nitrous oxide. And most of that is coming from manure handling and management, or some for feed production, to feed these animals. So we know all of this. We have a lot of measures about this greenhouse gas emissions in terms of CO2 equivalent. And we also have a lot of information about this, most greenhouse gas emissions from cattle in terms of beef and milk, and are the non-CO2 gases, like I mentioned, the methane and the N2O. Those are the main greenhouse gases that we talk in terms of cattle production. We know what is the global methane budget, and these are the emitters of methane around the world, and we have sinks of methane around the world here. So it's very hard to keep measuring this or to have an assessment of what is the amount that is being produced and what is the amount that is being mobilized in all of these different paths here. In general, there is some sort of a balance here, and the data is more or less stable in the sense. So showing from the 1990s to 2018, so this is the share of U.S. Greenhouse gas emissions by economic sectors. This is transportation, a little bit of increase, electricity generation, industry, agriculture. As you can see, fluctuates, goes up and down, but if you look at the area here, or the height, from 1990s to 2018, it's almost the same. It's been kind of a static. This is commercial, and this is residential. So that's the fluctuation of that. So it's very different from the image or the information we get. Everything is spiking or going really high up. And it gets even more complicated when we start talking about these different numbers. So this is greenhouse gas emissions, and I'm showing here all different economic sectors, then in agriculture, and then in livestock species. So when we put this in perspective, you have this agriculture responsible for about 9.6% of the total greenhouse gas emission. This is CO2 equivalent. Out of that, 41% comes from livestock. Out of that livestock, 54% comes from beef cattle. If you do the math, beef cattle is responsible for 2.17%. 2.2% of the total CO2 equivalent emission in the United States. Of course, this percentage will change depending on the country that you're actually comparing this. So I think the picture here is, yes, it is a contributor, there is no question about it, but I think we have bigger fish to fry to address the CO2 equivalent emission, at least in the US and many other places. And so it actually takes all of this type of information here. So this 3.9% is taking all livestock, this publication, and they are actually trying to say, where is that CO2 actually coming from? Something that is never mentioned on these stats or statistics or this press, and you have to pay attention to this, is what happens to the other products or that are coming from cattle that never go into the amount of CO2 equivalent being emitted. Very common, you see CO2 equivalent emitted per pound or per kilo of red meat, but you never take into account the other products coming from the beef operation or the beef production that will dilute that amount of CO2 equivalent being produced. And something else is, and like I mentioned before, we never discussed this, 86% of all the feed used to raise these animals are non-human edible food. In the US, like I said before, a long time period of raising a calf, those animals are grazing in a pasture condition, a pasture situation. And not all of that land can be cropped. Actually, most of that land cannot be cropped. And people don't want to build cities there either. So there is no use for that. So challenges and opportunities as we see, and we've talking about, and I mentioned this, can cattle be more efficient? And so there is this call for neutral or carbon neutral or neutral production or zero carbon production. So there are all of these different names. You see carbon neutral, net zero CO2, net zero greenhouse gas emissions. The differences are very subtle. So this one says net zero CO2 emission, this one is talking net zero greenhouse gas emissions, and this one is calling carbon neutral only. But in essence, all of these different definitions is trying to do what is this? The amount of carbon that is emitted by a farm, a ranch, is equivalent to the total amount of carbon that stays in that ranch. Therefore, it's not emitting more, it's not using more, and vice versa. So it's a zero carbon. It's kind of complicated to get to those numbers, but you can get to those numbers. And all of this started with all of this discussion about greenhouse gas, climate change, trying to keep this 1.5 Celsius degree change in the temperature overall, and all of these different proposals here. But something I want to mention to you right now is this. How are we going to measure this? From a scientific perspective, from an academia researcher is, yes, it's nice, it's easy to call out all of these problems and say this has to be done, that has to be done, but exactly how are we going to measure this, and how exactly are we going to implement this in the field? So those are things that you have to start thinking about, how these measurements are going to be done. So these are again stats showing the livestock contribute to agriculture greenhouse gas emissions. And those numbers, you have to pay attention to those percentages that are shown. It's a percentage of what? And like I said, if you look at on a percentage of the total agriculture, it's a nice number, it's a big number, it's in around 30s. If it is on a percentage within the livestock, beef cattle will be within the 45s. But if you look at the total, it's very, very minuscule. Not zero, but it's small. And that's why you have to pay attention when you're reading data like this. So this is exactly from the same publication showing evolution from 1990s to 2018. The greenhouse gas emissions, this is US by activity. So this is soil management. Look at this, soil management, enteric fermentation, manure management, and some other. So even when we're looking at within agriculture, we're talking about animal production, livestock production. Within livestock, we're talking about enteric fermentation, like the ruminant animal. Compared to agriculture soil management, it's actually smaller than that. But it is there. It's not zero. It's there. But you have to understand what it is. So this is the map of the US. I am actually right from somewhere right here in Texas. So this nice study here actually separated all of these different regions of the United States. And what they're trying to do is compare which one of these different sectors in terms of beef production are contributors to what. You will see the green one here, they are responsible for about 77% of all the methane emission. So 77% of all of the methane emissions in the beef cattle production is coming from the cow-calf, not from the feedlot. As very often you see a picture showing a feedlot and showing an emitter of methane. 77% is coming from the cow-calf. 35% of ammonia is coming from the feedlots because of the concentration of animals you find there. And all of these here, the majority of the nitrous oxide is actually coming from the cow-calf. It's associated with, not from the cow-calf per se, but is associated to the cow-calf activity. So again, this is actually data measuring all of this in those different areas. So where that number is coming from. So we have to start understanding that. And like I mentioned before, the assessment of greenhouse gas emissions, even equivalent base or non-equivalent base, is not that simple. There are these two different techniques we call the bottom-up and the top-down approach. And it's quite complicated because it needs to involve all of this carbon cycle, where is carbon located at, and what is happening to that carbon all of the time. But you have to be careful when you're looking at this carbon cycle, because it's a cycle, as it says. So it's part of the cycle. So it goes back up, it will come down. The question here you need to be asking is, how long does it take to come down? And what are we doing if the emission rate is greater than the sinking rate? So this is just to give you an idea of a different technique. So this one is the bottom-up. Bottom-up budget is like this. I count the number of animals and I measure each animal emission of CO2 equivalent, and I add them up to get the total for a region, right? The top-down approach is on the opposite. I measure the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, and then I allocate that to specific sources, non-point and point sources of that emission. That's why it's called bottom-up and top-down approaches. There is a discrepancy when you look at this. So when you look at this type of situation, going from the bottom up, we get this type of measurements or assessment of how much each one of these is actually contributing. This is the whole activity. And when you go from the top down, you get different amounts. You even get different amounts from the bottom up. This is the total amount you're getting per year. This was in 19. And this is the total amount you're getting from a top-down budget approach, a lot less. But not only the total difference, the total amount is different, the problem is how do you assign this to specific non-point and point sources of emission of this greenhouse gas? So the question is how to be sustainable. And even if you go to the World Bank or if you go to the FAO, they have different assessments of different viewpoints of what needs to be sustainable and how to be sustainable in a sense. But most of them right now, they're actually talking about this climate smart agriculture. And climate smart is actually the right direction of start measuring where these greenhouse gases are actually coming from. And that is the right point for this. So that actually leads us to the next topic of what is this impact of this climate smart, and I like to say climate responsible or climate neutral techniques or technology that is actually to start measuring data. The same way that Claudio was talking about assessing these or different measurements of animal welfare, in terms of sustainability, you also have to collect data to show either an improvement or a detriment or some problems in whatever you're measuring. And you probably heard about all of this farm of the future and all of this sensor and stuff like this. And these are the options to reduce methane from livestock is they're actually looking at this increasing productivity, and this was something they were talking about, increasing the intensification of production. The other one is to reduce this using, let's say, technological innovations like feed additives. The other one is genetics, animal welfare, health, all included. And also, all of this is to use different resources that are more efficient and will actually have an impact in terms of reducing environmental impact. It's not that the activity, the industry is not doing this. Everybody's looking for this because reducing methane emissions actually save energy to the animal. The animal can actually produce more if that energy is not going to methane emission. So everybody wants to do that. So it's not a sense that people are against it. Producers in general are in favor of this. It's just a matter of how it's going to be implemented, if it is profitable or has a sustainable economic environment, sustainable economic incentive for that. We know, this is data from FAO, that increasing the milk, the production of using more efficient cows will actually reduce this greenhouse gas emission per pound of milk or per kilo of milk produced. And the mathematics is very simple, and we know this for a long time. This publication from 2019, we know about this from the 70s. Even from the 60s we know this. Because the maintenance, the dilution of the maintenance of maintaining one animal is a lot lower than having 3, 4, 5 animals. The maintenance of 3, 4, 5, it's a lot greater than just one animal. So it's no wonder it's more efficient. And that's exactly what the industry, at least in the US and other countries, have done actually. They were able to reduce the number of animals and the resources and increase the efficiency, and they actually produce a lot less. But there are many other different ways to do this. But the problem is this: it's not one rule for everybody. It changes from one environment to another. It changes from one country to another. It changes from one production scenario to another production scenario. So the whole point of sustainability is not a blanket that goes to everybody. The sustainability has to go to every different person, every different scenario, every different player in the chain. So going to the point is, it's a lot of data-driven and a precision livestock to produce sustainable animals, or at least you have an assessment of what sustainability is and how sustainability can be implemented. So like I mentioned before, data collection is part of it, and we are there in the sense. Even today, we've been there for some time, but the evolution of technology, techniques, sensors, and computers are the ones that are actually allowing us to implement some of this. So Internet of Things, you do this all the time. You may not even know those. But the situation is this: we need to have hardware and software and data analytics all together, and storage of this data, that we can actually analyze all of this data in a sense. So not until 10 years ago, we're talking about big data or how to analyze this data. So it's part of an evolution. So we are starting that new era of analyzing this type of data and being able to collect this type of data. There are many sensors out there, and I'm just listing some of the sensors here. So these are the sensors that your generation, the next generation, will probably most likely use to collect data. But even though you will be collecting a lot of data at that time, you have to make sure that that data has been validated in the sense that that sensor is collecting the right data for what is your intended purpose. But there are many sensors out there, and you can have those sensors on the animal, in the animal, around the animal. And we are collecting that data. But you have to start thinking about that too, if it is beneficial to the producers, all of this data and what they're going to do with this data. I'm just showing a list of many, many different sensors. Some of these sensors, we work with them today, and we are actually collecting data. It's a lot easier when we have data, and we trust that data. So this is another picture showing another slide showing many different sensors that we use, even from a large-scale perspective. This is drones, or we can even use satellite images now to collect the data. And that has actually been the bottleneck of all of this sustainability, is collecting the data. Even quality, different drones. I don't think you can see this really that well, but this is a drone. This is somebody's finger. So that's where we have to go to collect that. That's how far we've been to collect this data. So, and like I said before, we've gone from this type of situation to improve not only feeding the animals, but also the quality of the feed and what to feed and how to feed these animals. It's not too long ago, you probably don't remember this, but that's how we used to milk the cows. You probably never done that before, but this is how we do it today, and even more advanced ways of doing it. So technology is helping, technology is out there. So in a sense, and I'm trying to go back to you, is sustainability is there every day, and it has been there. It's not that we need to start to be more sustainable. So just an ideas of all the type of data that we collect. So this is an experiment, not an experiment, this is a trial. In our situation, this is a beef cattle feeding these animals. We want to know the animal welfare, what is happening with these animals, and we want to know when these animals are eating, what these animals are doing, and stuff like this. So using this technology to measure identifying animals, we can identify the animals, and we can also identify when those animals are consuming, how much they're eating, and all of this. And then when we, of course, there are all the metrics here, we do increase the predictability and accuracy of these models here. But we go all the way to a situation like this. So this is a real live video, not a live right now, but it's a real video. So this is a 3 a.m., very early in the morning. So nobody's there, but the camera actually catch when that animal is actually licking the ground. You know what that behavior does to that animal? Just give you an example here. So with a technology like this, an AI system like this, I can actually program the system to send me a message not at 3 a.m., but sometime later, saying that animal needs attention, will need attention. So you like to talk about antibiotics and all of this, so instead of giving to everybody, target that animal or target those animals that are being identified by expert systems like this. So diet formulation is another one, and we've been doing this for a long, long time. Changing diet characteristics, improving the information about the diet, managing how these animals are fed, when these animals are fed. So there's a lot of experiments showing, and I'm showing here some, these are systems that we developed that actually capture most of the information about the diet quality, the information of the diet, information of the animal, and so forth. And the whole idea is actually always link this type of programs or this type of information with animal and AI. So just give you an example of using models, type of models that we developed in the past with AI type models, with big data to have a better assessment of these animals. So just for you to picture this, that animal in that picture, that video that I just showed to you, that animal is going to be here. Data collection, it's that image for the whole night, for the whole day, for 7 days a week, 30 days, 365, whatever. That goes through an AI process that tells this system here, we need to change something for that animal, and then it makes a decision of how that's going to be changed and what is going to be changed. In a sense that if we control the intake of that animal, I can actually add a specific drug to help that animal. I can target that animal if I can target that animal, or even target the pen, depending on the situation that we are. We know how to reduce methane emissions. It's not that, oh, this is something we need to start. No, we don't need to start. We know, we have all of this information. Different techniques, different feed implementation, different management, and so forth. And we know how much it changes. We have data for this. So the question in terms of sustainability, again, is how this can be implemented and what is the economic sustainability of this situation, what is the social, and so forth. We know all of this. We have collected data on all of this. We can actually even collect more information. This is actually collecting information on individual animals. I actually know when those animals are going to be ready for slaughter in a situation. I can have this type of information. This is done today, this type of information. In a situation like in the US, where you target a specific USDA grade or classification of carcass, that is extremely valuable to know when you want to slaughter that animal, and so forth. But there are challenges. There is no question about that. And it goes back to how we manage, how we collect, how we analyze all the data that we collect. From academia perspective or point of view, analyzing that data is extremely important. And being able to collect the data is also important. So we're talking about we want to be more sustainable, we want to be more climate responsible, climate smart, and so forth. But how are you going to collect that data? How are you going to analyze that data? And that's where we need to come in and help the industry in that sense. We've gone from all the way to raw data early on. Some of you probably don't even collect that anymore. All the way to go to what we call smart, intelligent programs today. Some of the students in this room and the students online have never even collected data. They're actually playing with data today. They're actually creating data using AI tools. Some of you have not collected that data, have not programmed any program specific, but you are actually creating intelligent, artificial intelligence systems that can actually analyze existing data or that will help data collection in the future. And that's what we have to pay attention. But there is a catch on artificial intelligence. As much as it can help us, and it's an extremely valuable tool for us in terms of sustainability, there will always be this bottleneck here that AI cannot explain why and how a result or a recommendation is made for a specific production. Remember this, for those of you that use AI, AI will give you an answer for your question, but it does not tell you why. It only tells you what to do, but it does not tell you why. So for students, you still have to interpret that. You still have to understand why that solution came to be and figure that out. However, you can actually use AI to understand how that solution came to be, but it needs to be a student. So, and that's what I'm talking about. You still have to train, you need to collect data, need to generate information, knowledge. This is what AI does not do for you. So if we're talking about sustainability, there has to be AI associated with the workforce. So that's what I'm saying. AI is really good, very low risk at the bottom, but very high risk trying to get wisdom from AI. Possible drawbacks, and I mentioned some of these. Not all land can be cropped. And if not all land can be cropped, it has to be used for something else. And that's where we find those cow-calf situations. Claudio was talking about, and others also talking about, whatever you drove from to get here, there are some of those high and lows, mountains that you cannot crop. So the only use for those, for now, would be grazing situations right now. So that is the best sustainability or sustainable option for some of those. How much of that, would be the impact of a specific recommendations for the future? How much is the real impact of this production that we see today? And like I'm talking here, the grain-fed or grain-finished animals, they are actually the ones that they don't produce a lot of methane. The ones that are contributing the most are the cow-calf, as I mentioned before, and yet changing those are not going to change much the impact of beef cattle production. Water consumption is a different story, though. We need to pay attention to that. And that's where we're actually talking about, some of us are actually talking about water footprint. Where is that corn is being produced, how that corn is going to be used, and what is the water footprint of that. That is another page in the sustainability issue for livestock, for animal production. And I mentioned sustainable livestock intensification. Why do you want to intensify these production scenarios if it is sustainable? Do you see the conundrum here? You want to increase the output of this type of system because you want to feed the world. But if you increase the production, the output of this system, it may not be sustainable anymore. But on the hindsight, you need to be careful not trying to sell this type of a production scenario as a sustainable way to produce it, because it will most likely not meet the social and economic sustainability issues. You're going to have a one-leg stool in this sense. Always have to be thinking about those 3 legs too. Is there limits? This is a typical simulation of we can actually learn from different models or different systems out there of what is the limits of sustainability. If I increase this much input or if I change this type of production, is it still going to be sustainable in the long run? And that's what we're trying to understand. What are the limits of sustainability, not only today, but in the future? Something else that we have to think about, and I mentioned in the beginning, is education. I think that if we want to achieve sustainability in a sense, we have to start thinking about educating the students and the next generation. It's not only educating the public, it's also educating the students. And you have all these social, environmental, socio-economic aspects of sustainability, but they also apply to education. So this is something that I've seen for all of these years, that I have actually helped the students from one place going to another and visiting different places and getting to know different production scenarios. You can only understand sustainability if you understand how the world produces food and how different places can actually help you solve a problem in your place and how you can solve problems from other places. So I think sustainability, and it's very important, and sustainability, education in sustainability is very important. And we have to start thinking about this, no boundaries, multinational collaborations, and fostering this discovery of techniques and so forth. Cannot live in silos anymore, because it's a sustainable world, it's a world problem. We have to train these peoples in the future. If we look at in other areas, not in agriculture, the majority of the students, 54% of all the students in major STEM fields, they are international students. This is data from the United States. So they are other fields, they already have more than 50% of their students are international in a sense. What is the international percentage of this university and other universities in agriculture? It's not about my program or your program, it's about a world program. And I think this is a topic by itself in terms of education. And this is not me saying this. This is actually many other folks saying, if we don't train these people, if we don't have a focus of education around the world, everything is gonna be harder, and sustainability is gonna be very, very hard. So, and all of these impacts in education, it's not coming from me. These are coming from large studies on what is the impact of study abroad and education of students. So I want to move on to, I think diversity is a key component of this, for sustainability. So just to give you a summary of this talk, I have 4 points here I want to make. Sustainability is not likely to be achieved without fixing other more pervasive, interconnected problems. It's very hard for you to go to a country that they're having famine or hunger and tell you have to be sustainable. That's not an issue for them. It's a multifaceted concept. And like I said before, it will not fit one scenario. It's one solution does not fit all. if true sustainability is to be achieved, it may not be accomplished as quickly as we want to be, and will likely require the collaboration of all players all the time. Otherwise, it's only going to be a mode, a fad at this point in time, and then will disappear. So you always have to keep that in mind. Sustainability, in a sense, it's a lot easier to achieve in a closed environment. If you narrow down, if you put a boundary in your system, it's very easy to achieve sustainability. But when you start thinking about a much larger area, let's say a boundless system, it's very hard. And the reason is this: there will always be exogenous sources or exogenous variables actually affecting the impact of your system. Very few people talk about this in terms of sustainability. And the mitigation of methane, something back to our field, the mitigation of methane per se does not guarantee sustainability. Those are two issues that they walk hand in hand, but solving one does not include solving the other. So climate smart and sustainability, they walk together hand in hand, side by side, but solving one does not necessarily mean we're going to solve the other. And yet, those are the big issues that we have to solve today. Climate smart, climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it, and sustainability of production. It may seem like that is a free lunch, but you probably know by now there is no such a thing as a free lunch, right? Not even the breakfast, the coffee break is free. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Okay. I think we have time for a discussion session, so I would like to invite Claudio and Luis to be in the table, and then we can have some questions from the audience and also from the students that are attending online. Someone would like to ask something to Luis or to Claudio to complete the discussion on the topic? Some question? Paul. Thank you, Paul.
Hi, Lewis. Interesting stuff there to think about. So, as you know, I come from a pediatric background. So when I saw your calf, and you were saying intervention with your single calf, so being looked at by camera, going through my head, being in a pediatric department, went personal medicine. Yeah, because, and that's a big thing in the human side. But then you started off with, saying this is how 110,000 or what it was. So where I'm having a slight problem here is putting those two together. So, where you've got big amounts of calves, sorry, little explanation here, and where you've got the personal, single cow type stuff. So is there a context dependent? I get that, but is there a kind of crossover point with this and the different technologies? So I just don't know enough about it, so I need some assuaging.
Oh yes, that's a very good question. Yes, so in our system we have this. So these are Kalan gates. We feed within a pen. We feed 5-6 animals. So it's very easy for us to actually determine what that animal is doing and when and stuff like this, right? But in a real production scenario, let's say a pen of animals usually vary from 100 to 200 animals. So we have cameras that can actually monitor these 100, 200 animals. So imagine a pen, it's just like this room. We have so many high definition cameras that they can actually determine all of those animals. You may not actually be so specific in terms of what time that animal was leaking the floor or was doing something like that, but you're always gonna get a red flag. That animal is doing something they're not supposed to be doing. Or that animal was leaking another animal. Or that animal was doing some weird behavior or showing some weird behavior. So that is, right now, we can actually do this. So we have cameras. So of course we have at least four cameras in a pen, and they can actually capture all of this. So that's what actually requires the power of very, very powerful computers and actually the very fast transmission of the data, so it actually can analyze all of that. So we're not talking about, I think everybody here is very aware of, let's say, a statistical analysis of a regression and stuff like this. So this type of analysis involves image analysis. Image analysis, imagine like, I think the minimum highest quality that we can get is like a 3 megabytes. 3 megabytes picture. So 3 megabytes, you're analyzing this every second. So that's why it requires all of this powerful analysis or data transmission and analyzing it. We do have cameras that can do that right now. We do have some systems that can do that right now. And I think it is only going to improve more in the future. Yeah.
About 200 at the moment, but you're seeing slightly bigger in the future.
Yes, yes. Yes, we can do that. It's just adding more camera. The problem would be for grazing animals that's going to be quite harder, I should say, because if you have a much larger area, it's going to be very, very hard to collect individual animals at that time. Yeah. But on a feedlot situation, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's where we need it.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or comments on the topic? Okay.
Okay, first of all, thank you both for your lectures. My question is to Luis. If I understood it well, your work is just inside the farm, right? So the data that you showed about the greenhouse gas emissions of 2% of meat is just inside the farm. It's not from farm to fork, right? Okay, so it doesn't consider the transportation system, industry process, storage, right? So, and we know that this is an important amount of the greenhouse gas emissions and footprint of. And farmers and producers are being blamed for an amount that doesn't belong to them. And so is there any chance to use this data in order to push the change of the energy produced in US, for example, that we know is not clean or renewable or whatever?
Yes, that's a very good question. So this is another boundary that needs to be established when determining these percentages. So we have to be very careful when we say beef, cattle production versus beef production. So beef production involves all the way from the animal all the way to the meat, to the beef that you eat. So that includes everything. In transportation, let's say, raising that calf, finishing that calf, transportation of that calf to slaughter that animal, processing of that meat, of that carcass, fabrication of the meat, meat transportation to the retailers, purveyors, and then consumers. It stop at the packaging, then it stop at the consumer. So the beef production is different, but the beef cattle, the production of the animal, it stops when you sell the animal, okay? The problem is this. It's very hard. The producers cannot be blamed for what happens after they sell the animals because it's beyond them right now. So then the other system, those players, they are the ones that need to improve their efficiency, transportation efficiency, energy, packaging. Another one is, I'm gonna say the wrong number, but it's what? About 60% of loss in food. Our food loss, it's too high right now. So you have to remember that all of that is being accounted for, how much is being produced and how much is being sold, and then it's not sold, but it produced CO2 equivalent, so it's being accounted for. So then the producer, actually, the beef cattle production actually stops when he sells the product, which is not that different than when I sell you my car, I'm not responsible for how you drive your car, right? So it's exactly the same thing. So I am responsible if I'm a car maker. I am responsible to all the way that I sell the car. How you drive it is your problem, right? And the same thing. So it's very hard to control all of this. But I think in yet has to be spoken of. People need to be aware. People need to be aware of this. And I think it needs to be very clear when we talk about this. But that's a very, very, very good question because we don't set the boundaries. We don't tell when it starts and when it ends. And then we generate all of this confusion. Oh, but you're responsible for this. You did not include this. Well, I did not include this because it's not part of me. I don't have control over that. But yes, there are, like in the US, Europe, many other countries, they're actually talking about different ways of producing cheaper energy, even though cheaper is kind of awkward because it's never going to be cheap, right? You always have somebody's going to pay for that, but you're always going to have some, unless we have this fusion energy or whatever, right? But yes, that's a very good point.
I just would like to add one thing which can be useful out of here and out of the school. Many of the Luis images I saw in the presentation came from a very interesting book, which is Sacred Cow, a book that has to be filtered by the scientific mind because it contains some promoting something, but actually is a very nice narrative review of many, many papers dealing with animal sustainability and beef demonization, and all that part can be, I read it just the past year and open up my mind a lot. So if you have the opportunity maybe to buy it or download the PDF, even I don't have to say it, just take it a look because it's really interesting, very well written, and a lot of scientific data come from there. And this is the way science can talk with people, with this kind of divulgative initiative. So take advantage from this because I see many images from this and it can be good to read.
Any more questions? Okay, Raul.
Luis, thank you very much for your talk. I think it's important to put on the table the efforts that the cattle industry and the livestock industry is doing just to reduce emissions and be more sustainable. And this is something that other sectors are not doing as much as we are doing. And it's also that personally, every individual has to do in their own ways, right? I think it's something, and they are blaming the sector. So in general, I completely agree with your talk, but, sorry, there is something I kind of disagree. Is that message you send that if the land is not cropped, it's not useful? I'm not agree with that at all. I mean, we have learned, science has said last years that forests, wetlands deserts, every kind of ecosystem is important for the global health. We have been deforested, we have been drying wetlands, we have been changing deserts for bringing water to deserts just to crop. And this has important impact on global health, right? So at the same time that we are reducing emissions through all these new technologies and new learnings and improving efficiency, we are eliminating sinks of carbon, right? So we are improving for some part, but we are destroying some important areas that should help us to keep this balance. So this message, I think, had to be changed in some way, because with this message we are telling the people, okay, go ahead, it's forest, there is nothing, monkeys and birds, cut it and chop it and put some cows. Or is wetlands, there is bad odors, is just wet, snakes. No, and we know now that I'm just learning this from Florida. I'm living in Florida this year, and I'm learning about the importance of wetlands. So what do you think about that? I mean, is that...
I think we are in agreement, actually. We are 100% in agreement, because I did not say that because it cannot be cropped, it's not useful. What I said is this: if there is a land that cannot be cropped, it has to be used for something else. So cropped is something that cannot go there. So like if you have a grassland that can only have grass, it has to be grassland, right? If you can find other ways to put a forest, let's say, yes, that might be a way to do it. But otherwise, you can actually keep it a grassland, but you can actually have animals grazing that grassland, harvesting that grass, making that grass to generate, actually sequester carbon, because grasslands are very, very good sequesters of carbon. It's actually a sink of carbon. So that's what I try to say is this: if there are areas that cannot be used for crop, then it needs to be used for whatever is the purpose of that. If it is a grassland, we can probably put some animals there to harvest that and still increase the carbon sequestration or keep the carbon sequestration. I agree with you, the wetlands, the problem with the wetlands, and Brazil has a lot of wetlands here. The problem with the wetlands is every time you remove the water from the wetlands, the carbon emission actually the methane and the carbon emission goes really high. And you may decrease methane emission because it's not wet, not an anaerobic situation anymore, but actually the amount of CO2 that's going to be released actually skyrocket. But the good thing about let's say, peatlands and wetlands, some of this, is that once you put water back, that carbon will go back, and it's probably going to stay there. So I agree with you. I think there are some areas, there are some biomes that they have to stay the way they are. And they cannot be used for crops, like the wetlands, cannot be used for grazing animals, unless you use it the way it is without changing it. If you can harvest that grass without changing that biome, I think it's okay. It's almost like you're double dipping, if that's a possibility. But the forest, I agree with you. I don't think we need to cut all the forest to use the land or stuff like this. But forest is something very intriguing. I think we probably need to think about smart ways to manage forests, because every time we cut a tree or cut a forest, not the whole forest, and allow it to grow again, more carbon is going to be sequestered with that growth of that forest, right? So I think we have to have smart management of the forest. We have that. So, no, we're in agreement with that.
Okay, any more question? Okay.
Thank you both for the presentations. I wanted to ask Luis about sustainability. You said that sustainability is more or less about keeping the production without changing the status quo. But I was thinking, how can we change the system without changing the status quo to reach that balanced three-legged stool when one of those legs is being focused and the other two are being negligent?
Yes, that's a very good question. So I think it's you have to think about this. If you are in a production scenario, what I meant to say was this. If you are in a production scenario that the status quo is sustainable, then you have to keep it. And I think I said that when I was showing those pictures of the small scale farm and agriculture. I think it was there was a rice field or something like that. And that what I meant to say is that if that is already sustainable, there might be, you need to keep it the way it is because there might not be other ways to increase the productivity of that area or that land without not affecting the sustainability. So you always, if you try to increase the output of a system in a specific region or a biome, you will always change the balance in terms of sustainability. So it's your job to figure out ways to counterbalance that. So for instance, if you decide to add, let's say, more nitrogen to a specific land to increase grass production, you need to think about how you're going to counteract the N2O production of that land, because it will increase the nitrous oxide coming out of that land. You will increase the productivity of per area, but you will always increase the emission. So you have to figure out how you counterbalance that. So when I say status quo, when it is already sustainable, you may not be able to increase the production because you will cause an imbalance there. That's a very good question. Glad you're paying attention.
Okay. Is any more? Me? Yes.
Thank you very much, both. I mean, these were wonderful presentations. And I was thinking in a different perspective. You have touched a little bit, but bringing the context of low and middle income countries, the sustainability and the advancement of technology, it's really something that the people are struggling with, right? So like the technological advancement in terms of agriculture in low and middle income countries, what do you think about the context? Because most of the farms are owned by, the smaller scale or middle scale farmers, and they are struggling. But on the other hand, they will be the mostly affected people or farmers in terms of the changes of the climates. But they are also, the struggling with increase their food production and trying to make a balance of what do they need and then what do they want to achieve in the future. So what is your perspective of, seeing all this technological advancement and thinking about the sustainability? How do you put the low and middle income countries in the context? And what do you think about the feasibility of these advancement?
I will start, and Claudio can help and fix all the stuff that I'm going to say. But what happens is this. I think it goes back to the same answer. If you're in a status quo and you're already sustainable, there is no reason to change. The only reason to change is when people come and tell you need to be more productive. You need to increase your production. You have to have a more intense production, like livestock intensification and stuff like this. But it goes back to every time you try to increase the livestock intensification production, you will unbalance the system. It will either go to the right or it will go to the left. So you have to figure out how you're going to counterbalance that to bring it back to the center. I understand the question that low income or small scale production, they don't have the same advantage that large scale production does. So what happens is, in a sense, the low income, small scale, in a sense, they are more or less sustainable because they are not adding too much inputs to the system. So they're maintaining. But the problem is that they're maintaining for their subsistence, for their small population and things like that. So they are very hard for them to increase the production. I don't think that these are the ones that we're targeting. I think the ones that we're targeting are the ones that are actually producing, they're using a lot of resources, they are actually producing a lot. And I think those are the ones that we have to help to bring it back to the center, be more neutral. The small scale, small farm holders, income, I don't think they are the problem. Not at all. I actually think that they are more actually balanced. But we cannot tell all the large producers to become small like that, because then we don't have the production that we need. So that is that difference. Those small scale, they are in a sense more sustainable than the large scale. We need to bring the large scale more central and help them and identify ways for them to be more sustainable in a sense. The small scale, I'm not too concerned. I'm concerned about them in terms of, yes, if global warming, climate change, whatever happens, and if their purchase power decreases, yes, I think they are in danger. They are going to be affected a lot. So then I think there are other ways, other tools to solve the problem. But I don't think it is sustainability. I think there has to be some sort of incentives, some sort of other policies. And that's what I mentioned in the beginning. Politics has to be brought into the sustainability discussion. Otherwise, we see that nothing happens. And that's why we need to bring them, not to ignore them, but bring them into the discussion and hold them accountable and responsible for this type of attitudes or what has to be done. That's my view on that.
And to my opinion, more than that, not only they are not the problem, but they should be promoted better than they are now. So in this case, I believe for small farming, rural area, and all that kind of livestock system, the key is not the sustainability, is not the animal welfare, is not the product itself. The key is the communication. Because we are well aware that the 0 kilometer distance meat is more sustainable because it has no transportation, it has no packaging most of the time. So we are well aware of all this. But to make them survive, we have to protect them like an extinction species of animal. Okay, and the only way to protect them is to communicate. So communication is the key for their survival, and valorization of the product. Open the door of this small farming to the people and show them what happened over there is the solution to make them survive. To create value around them is the only way. Otherwise, they will be, for sure, just absorbed in a system bigger than they are, and the destiny will be to close them. This is the only way. But the more we, as scientists, will be able to tell the politician to valorize them, so this is a three players game, the more they will survive and the more they will be able to continue as they are, because they are not the problem. Actually, they can be the solution of all this. So they are well balanced in terms of sustainability. They are well balanced in terms of welfare, because less animals are more more easy to control and to take care of. They know the cattle by name most of the time. So this is something you have to deal with. But without communication, without promotion, without this kind of action, for sure, the destiny will be too close. So my idea is to use communication on that. And even give them the possibility to be known. That's the point.
Okay. Thank you, Claudio and Luis. I think we can finish the first day. We are already good on time. So thanks for your classes. Okay, so tomorrow we will start at 8:30 sharp. So everyone be here, and then we can start. Thanks for the online attendance, and tomorrow there's a new link, and we already sent, but just pay attention to enter in the correct link, okay? There's some questions that were sent by the chat, and because of the time it would be difficult to follow, but all the speakers, all the invited professors will be during the week, so we'll have the chance to talk and to discuss and to talk then personally, okay? But tomorrow, yes. Okay, thank you and see you tomorrow.